Good morning, everybody!
Remember last week when we dug deep into an old and mysterious repair that someone had made many years ago? So we were right, it is rotten.
It was rotten.
It was rotten. Well, this week we devise a crazy way to properly repair that old repair. And it involves a road trip, a huge aluminum boat sitting under a walnut tree, and a man named Ken.
So, I'm Ken.
And with this unlikely combination, we actually managed to get some pretty awesome results.
I am really happy with how this turned out. We replaced the whole cabin top.
Let's quickly review what we're up against. This beam here is a pretty important one. It supports the cabin top, and it supports all these other smaller deck beams that support the side decks. But at either end of this very important beam is quite a lot of rot. And as it turns out, the middle of this beam also rotted at one point, though somebody went in and replaced those rotten sections some time ago. Still, for such a vital, structural beam, we want something very strong, and this patched-together beam with rotten ends doesn't quite cut it. But we also don't want to completely replace this beam, because doing so would require some very delicate work, and would risk damaging a few other vital pieces surrounding it. So we aren't happy with the structural integrity of this beam, but we also don't want to remove and replace it. It may seem like an impossible situation, but Aladino is always a man with a plan.
Good morning, everybody! Welcome to this week's episode. Follow me and I'll show you what it will all be about. It's time to solve the issue of our main beam.
Aladino has already made a new beam, but it's actually not going to be a direct replacement for the old one. Instead, we've come up with a more complex, but ultimately easier and stronger solution. Here's the plan. We're going to leave the old beam in place. Instead, we'll remove this old sister beam that's bolted to it, and we'll replace it with a brand new full-length sister beam. But that's not all. We'll also cut off the rotten ends of this old beam and scarf in new ones. And on the advice of a good friend who also happens to be an architect, we're also going to create a flitch beam. Put simply, a flitch beam is a compound beam comprised of two wooden beams with a steel or metal plate in between them for added strength. Since this original beam is now seriously patched together, we want to add back as much strength to it as possible, and this flitch beam presents a solid and relatively easy solution. Now, let's just see if we can put our plan to action. Step 1 is to remove the old sister beam. But as always, nothing is easy as it seems. The outer bolts came off no problem, but towards the center of the beam, the bolts were hidden behind this piece of teak trim. We were actually really nervous to remove the trim. It's usually bedded down with some kind of sealant, and we didn't want to risk splintering this really expensive teak. But we couldn't think of another solution. We had to try.
Between the beam and the trim, there's a little bit of a gap here, which means there's not sealant everywhere. Because this is quite a big surface for the sealant, that's why I was worried that we couldn't remove it in one piece. But I guess if I plan on taking the whole day and being really careful with the hot air fan and spatulas and knives, maybe we can do it. It would make it a lot easier.
Maybe there's no sealant at all?
The other pieces had sealant and I broke those, but I can try. The sealant. Oh, this is a good sealant.
Awesome! No damage!
A few teak hairs.
Uh-oh.
I don't know about you guys. The suspense in here is killing me. Well, it's easier on a small surface.
Of course.
And now let's see the big one. Cool, look at those. Ooh, nice!
What?
Awesome!
What?
The plank just sprung back.
Oh, it's not bedded at all!
It's not bedded.
No way!
Awesome! Wow, this is the news of the not century maybe. Can you hold it on one side?
Yeah.
It's gonna fall over my
Wait,
head.
so what this means is we totally could have removed this one instead of drilling through it for the beams, but
damn it.
oh well.
Maybe. This one was certainly removed or even redone.
Yeah.
Because they made the repairs in the cockpit. We don't know if they did that with all the trim. So
Yeah.
that one might be bedded.
Okay, I'm holding it.
Nice! This reveals quite a bit, doesn't it?
Does. How interesting. So now we can see how the repair has been made.
3 laminations, well replaced. They have repaired 3 laminations. So yeah, the rot must have been quite extensive.
Yeah. So what do you think of this repair?
I think it's valid. But yeah, it's not the strongest because you still do interrupt the fibers with this cut. It's not a scarf, so you are relying on the glue surface here. But you can see that there they've made it shorter just to make it fit within the cabin space here. Yeah, not the strongest, but absolutely doable. And since the sister was added, this is also very valid.
Next step, remove the sister, right? Because now we've got access to these bolts, so we can just take the sister off.
Yeah. And now the next thing I want to tackle is get rid of the ugly rot. So I copied the idea that we saw on the main beam, how it was repaired once, because this will be absolutely the easiest way of dealing with it. And since the new sister is taking the loads, it is just about getting rid of rot, so there is no spores accidentally that might keep eating our fresh wood. But that is why all these supports are in place. I don't want this to shift on me. So I've added 2 more. There is 4 of these supporting the cabin top. Wow. What a perfect scenario. This is what I was hoping for. I made the cut completely through and it didn't sag a single bit. It didn't make a sound, nothing. So this means my support brackets over here and the other are doing its job, and everything else that is supposed to hold it in place are holding it in place. There is not too much weight and no movement. I expected it still to sag a tiny little bit, but it didn't do a thing. So this is really awesome. And I can just keep working on it until everything is replaced and bonded and screwed in place again. A success. Ooh, here you can see that rot travels further. It all looked good in this area, but there is some rot right here that was continuing. Oh, focus. Focus. Oh well, I'll show you guys. Alright, so far I'd call this a full success. The glue that they used 40 years ago really does break up and it does not bond at all anymore. As you saw, as soon as I started pushing, after making the cut, I pushed on this lamination a little bit and they always came off. Absolutely not taking a splinter of the other wood with it. After I do this with epoxy, if I had to redo it again, then you have to make clean cuts with oscillating multi-tool or chisel it away. It would not separate like this anymore. I feel good about these repairs. Here we go. So I have cut out the new section, which is going in place here. Man, what a messy procedure. But this is done now.
With the rot removed, it was time for step 3 of our master plan, creating the metal plate for the flitch beam. Only one problem. We're not metal experts, and we don't have metal cutting tools, but we do know someone who has everything we need, and he offered to help. If you want to just say your name and a little bit of your history with projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm Ken Howenstein, and I've been building things since I was a child, I think. Eventually started my own cabinet business. When the economy was not so good, I ended up often in the shipyard again. So I've been bounced back and forth. My last things before I retired was working as a project manager on new construction in a small shipyard. We built 200-foot barges, shorter stuff. We remodeled several commercial fishing boats, steel and aluminum. And this boat started from scrap left over from one of those aluminum projects. But as it is, we have a home nearly finished, so there you go. We cut and tape the line.
Shall I say something?
Sure, say something.
So here we are at Ken's amazing workshop, and we're about to make the aluminum plate, which is part of our flitch beam.
We got to know Ken thanks to YouTube. He reached out to us because he's also building a boat, and said that if we ever wanted to hang out and talk boats, or needed any help with small aluminum projects, he wasn't too far. So huge thanks to Ken for reaching out and helping us with this piece. After a really nice visit with Ken, we left with an expertly shaped aluminum beam. It was time to return to the workshop. Huge thanks to Ken. His handiwork will be a really important part of Magic Carpet 2. So this turned out pretty nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Cool. Well, now I double check the height so that it's not extending. Nice. Oh man, this is a mix of boat yoga and jungle gym now. Now I go check that it's not protruding from above. That should be good.
With all the components assembled, the whole project was nearly complete. The last step is just assembly, and of course, a coat of epoxy on top of everything. Aladino started by drilling out the bolt holes so that the interior of those can also be epoxy coated.
We are done. This is the last project we are completing this time around.
From a rotted and patched together beam at risk of failure to an extremely solid and even beautiful construction that will feel good about trusting in high seas, I think that's a pretty good place to end this entire refit for now. Next week, we'll be back with a big 6-month wrap-up before we head across the Atlantic to Europe to reset our visas of the States and attend to a few other pressing matters over on the other continent. But not to worry, we'll be back to the States and to Magic Carpet 2 as soon as possible. A huge thank you to all of you for being here, for watching, for commenting, for subscribing. We're so appreciative to have you along for the ride. Extra big thanks to our patrons. Without you guys, it wouldn't be possible for us to keep going like we are. And it's just amazing that we get to fix boats and make videos for our job. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And thank you for making that possible. We're so happy to have you along for the ride. An extra big thanks to these folks who go the extra mile every week and every month to make sure Magic Carpet keeps being produced. We will see you all in the next episode.